morning, and welcome to Mecca Live here on Thursday, November 19th, 2020. We are going to cover a topic today that has a theme. Oh, the lighting got weird. We're going to cover a topic today that's in line with the theme that we began on Tuesday. So, the theme for this week was when safe places aren't safe. And on Tuesday, we discussed microaggressions in church. Today, we're going to talk about mission statements, bylaws, and behaviors. Before I get into that, I want to remind you that next week is our Thanksgiving holiday. And I say our, meaning the traditional American holiday. We call it fall break or whatever. But we know that a lot of people are going to be traveling and moving about the country, as it were. So we haven't decided yet if it's going to be a full length clip on live on Thursday. It may be pre-recorded. I just want to let you know that, but I want to tell you up front that we will have Tuesday and Thursday lives. The Thursday may be pre-recorded, but we'll see. We'll decide on that. But either way, you will have our live for Thursday. And I'm sorry, I got disheveled there quickly. So on Tuesday, the topic will be why it matters to matter. And on Thursday, the topic will be who determines your gratitude. So when people say, well, you should be grateful for that. Like who gets to determine or define your gratitude. So Tuesday, why it matters to matter. And on Thursday, who determines your gratitude. But again, today our topic is when safe places aren't safe, mission statements, bylaws, and behaviors. So let's go right ahead and get right into it. I want to say this briefly. There is a lot happening right now in our country and in our society, from state to state, and also in our local community. Mentioning safe and unsafe, mentioning that we are aware that there are places and spaces that have been designated or designed or promoted to be areas where you are safe, where you can expect to be safe or are presumed to be safe, and then later find out that you're not. That in and of itself is a mouthful. Just having that discussion or having had that experience or having had that shared experience. And when I say that, I mean one, maybe more than you and someone else have had a similar experience, or if you are experiencing or have experienced the impact of someone you love dearly or care about or someone close to you having been rendered unsafe in a space, in a place that was designed to be safe, can also impact you. So that's that secondary kind of situation. I don't want to dismiss it. I don't want you, if you're watching and listening to this, to interpret bylaws and mission statements and addressing safe places that aren't safe outside of what we traditionally or commonly think of when we think of unsafe. And a lot of times when we say, well, this place or this place or this space has been designated to be safe, but it wasn't. It's usually, a lot of times our thoughts go all the way to the extreme or towards specific settings and specific types of unsafety. And I want to be clear that there's a continuum. Safety is on a continuum, especially in this context. So if inside this space of discussing aspects and situations and circumstances where you may not feel safe when you think you should, because you were at school or at church or at work. Those are just examples. If I share a time and space where people felt like, well, I have a relatively realistic expectation to be safe at the bus stop or, walking the street, you may be like, really? Well, it depends on what time and blah, blah, blah. So I want to be clear that because I'm discussing mission statements and bylaws and behaviors, I'm not minimizing or promoting that one aspect of safety is higher or more of a priority than the other. I'm just speaking plainly. So I wanted to be clear because sometimes, if we've had an experience or been party to an experience, and then someone shares a different type of context, or subtext, sometimes people have the tendency to be like, oh, so I guess my situation, that's not what we're doing today. Just wanted to be clear about that. So let's get right into it. When safe places aren't safe, organizational mission statements, bylaws, and behaviors. So let me unpack that title for a second. So traditionally, when we talk about mission statements, it usually has something to do with an organization or a company or a business, right? Sometimes it's related to groups that provide a service, and they may not necessarily be a business. It could be like a nonprofit group. It could be an organization that this is the cause, and on this day every week, we're going to do this for this population, or we're going to provide this service free of charge. But this is why we're doing it. This is our mission statement. And I'm saying it like this because I want to be clear that even though when we hear mission statement, our minds may go right to business, organization, nonprofits, or some type of company, it doesn't necessarily have to be just those four entities, or those four sections where we have mission statements. The mission statements exist outside of companies and businesses, organizations, and nonprofits. So I want to be clear there. But when we talk about mission statements, a mission statement is a formal summary of the aims and values of an organization, a company, a group, a business, etc. So a formal summary of the aims and values. So when we think of aim, that's where I'm trying to go. That's my goal. That's my target. That's where my focal point is. My values, right, are the things that are important. These are the priorities. These values are the foundation on which this mission statement stands. So the mission statement is comprised of a foundation or pillar for values and aims. So this is the target. This is where we're trying to go. This is what's fueling us to get there. See how that works? So with that said, that's the mission statement in a nutshell. Bylaws, though, I mean, unless you are a part of an organization, unless you're on a board, unless you serve in some capacity where there's collaboration in a meeting type setting, and there needs to be some sort of format or protocol or process for this meeting or for this organization, then we have the bylaws that are established. And when we think about bylaws are a set of rules, or if an organization or a company or a business, a group, nonprofit, whatever the case may be, board, whatever, has established itself or has been established by whatever, either the community or a company, or I'm trying to figure out, I'm trying to keep this broad because it's like so many different things have bylaws. Like a company or a board or a group has been created for a certain purpose, right? We have the aims and the values for this group. Okay, what's the process? What are the rules? What are the boundaries? How are we going to function? How do we make sure that everything gets taken care of in an orderly fashion, in a fair fashion, and in a manner that has built-in accountability, right? Direction and guidance, but also accountability and responsibility. How do we do that? It's not always bylaws, but bylaws are a good place to start. And those are the rules that are made by the group, the company, the society, whoever's creating this thing, to control the actions of its members, right? So it's kind of like regulations made by a local authority or local ordinance. And so you see how when I say authority and I say ordinance, our minds tend to kind of go more into the community. Maybe it has something to do with what's expected and the rules for an example, let's use noise, right? So noise pollution. Are you able to play your radio as you drive through your community? Are you able to, if we're looking at the community and the ordinances in the community, we think about safety, right? We think about what the community looks like, right? Sometimes there's noise ordinances. Sometimes there are the care of your the area around your house. Like sometimes you can get violated, if your lawn is too high, right? So when we think of ordinances, a lot of times that ordinance, that word takes us into other aspects, maybe the community or different parts of our government, and not so much when we zone in on organizations or zone in on businesses. So again, mission statements, bylaws, and behaviors. Now, we know that behaviors are actions, right? But as it relates to this topic inside this context, I'm looking at obviously behaviors are the way in which a person or the way in which one acts or comports oneself, right? How they control the way their mannerisms and things of that nature. But when we're talking about bylaws and mission statements, and when we're talking about businesses and companies, and we're talking about ordinances and communities, we're looking at the action and mannerisms that are systemic. And I'm going to say systemic and system, meaning two different things. Systemic meaning we create a system and it goes through the system. This behavior is systemic because it's built into this system. It works its way through how this business or how this company or how this group or how this nonprofit operates. It's part of the system. The other piece is how systems interact with other systems. Good morning, Don. How they interact. So if I'm talking about when safe places aren't safe, and I'm looking at bylaws, and I'm looking at mission statements, and I'm looking at behaviors again inside the context of bylaws and mission statements and these types of formal groups, because I can say, hey, we have the holidays coming up. I want to do something fun for the kids in my community. If you're interested, meet me at the park. That's informal. But if I'm a part of a group that has bylaws and a mission statement, and this thing that's happening in the park kind of fits in line with what the aim and values are for this formal group that to which I'm a part, and this event matches the values and aims of this group, okay, now you have a couple of things happening, right? We can participate. We didn't start the group. We didn't, this event happened in the park. That's not ours, but we're going to co-sign it and come and bring people, right? So then the expectation is different. Hey, I'm coming to the park. We'll just do some fun stuff for kids. Let's just come out and, we may have some fun. We may have some face painting and some music and play some games. That's kind of loose and varied. I don't know who's running it. I don't know. I just said, hey, let's meet. I don't know who's coming. What are the expectations? What is allowed and not allowed? But when we have bylaws, when it's a formal group that has a mission statement and aims and values, then we have an expectation, right? And the expectation is made clear inside the guidelines and the standards promoted and established. Those are the guidelines and the standards form that parameter, right? That shows anyone looking in or looking to this organization or this group, that tells them, okay, this is what they do. This is how they do it. These guidelines and parameters form kind of like the template, right? So the reason why I'm taking this time to say, to share different examples, or analogies of bylaws, mission statements, and behaviors as it relates to when safe places aren't safe is because, and understand that what I'm about to share has only been further exasperated by the pandemic, and has only been further exasperated by some of the things that we've seen socially in our society and in our environments, right? Only further exasperated by some of the things that we're witnessing currently in our news. If we are operating in an environment that is already toxic, if we're operating in an environment that's already hostile, if we're operating in an environment that's already in flux because there's this tension and stress that ebbs and flows, and we have that generally. We have this ebb and flow of tension and stress, but as it ebbs and flows, the ebb and flow becomes higher and higher. So we come to work, we come to our organization, we come to these different groups that we participate in or are a part of already here. So then when the tensions are already kind of high, And then we go into this place either that should be safe just because it's identified as such, or because I go to this place to do this thing, right? This is where I go to work, or this is where I go to provide this service. I go there, I do that, I leave, right? If I'm going to provide some sort of volunteer service, and what I do is make the shakes, or I'm dropping off donations, or whatever the case may be, that's the thing. Drop off the donations and leave. But if I'm dropping off the donations, I know I gotta walk past this person who always has something to say about what kind of clothes I'm wearing. I go to, and once I pass that gauntlet, I have to go over here and walk through the picket signs for this, and then it's a lot, and I'm already here. The reason why I want to talk about safe places is because a lot of times, especially in our most recent national history, many groups and many populations have been clear and have been public about their sense of unsafety. They don't feel like they're safe. And it's not just groups that fit inside certain race or color populations. It's been across the board. And if you don't remember, do a tertiary search on the internet over just 2000. What groups, and I'll help you out, what groups that are traditionally or historically marginalized have stated plainly that they have felt unsafe in 2020? What groups that are historically or commonly marginalized or stigmatized have said that they don't feel safe? And now we've arrived. So it's not just groups of people that fit or appear to fit in certain racial categories or color categories or sex categories or gender categories or health categories. Or now we've arrived, and I'm going to say this briefly because I don't want this to turn into a political conversation, because although these topics and the material presented does in fact overlap, that's not the topic, and that's not the direction or trajectory that I want this live to go. But I do need to say this because many of you watching are also very present as it relates to what's happening in our country today and the things that are on the news. And so with that being said, that's my disclaimer for this brief statement, because it applies and it also illuminates the points and the facts that are going to be presented. And that is this: aside from race, color, gender, sex, age, health, blah, 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 we are also in a current situation, a current political environment where now the two primary parties are not just, I want to win, you want to win, we're better, we promote this, you promote that, and so we butt heads a lot. It's not just that. It's the fact now that between the two the two major political parties, it's not just that we're separate parties now. The verbiage and the conversation across the news and social outlets is that we are not just separate parties, but we are now enemies. And as such, we can now label each other as not American. And inside our history, in our meaning American history, inside our history, when that's happened within the government or regarding the government, specifically functioning within the members of this nation, our history shows that this is the making of something very horrible. But when we look at the bylaws, and for our country, what are the bylaws? When we think about the documents that put things in place that show what the order is. So remember before when we talked about behaviors and was like how we talked about actions and mannerisms and how one comports oneself, but then inside the context of bylaws and mission statements and things like that, we talked about how systems interact with systems, but then also how some things are built in and can be systemic. How having bylaws, how having mission statements, those things shape the life and breath and also fuel the focus of said government or said organization or said business or company or group or nonprofit, blah, 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 right? We said that. But now, looking at what's happening inside our nation and our nation's government in the context of what's being presented today, you can see how, we have different branches of government, and those branches meet, sometimes intersect, but they don't, or overlap, but they don't cancel out each other, right? So we have these things that the aim at the point where these documents were created was freedom and liberty, right? And so the documents were created to support that. So the aim is freedom, the aim is liberty, the aim is independence. And so the documents that shape those parameters, the documents that serve as the guidelines, right? And the standard by which we're not only going to maintain the freedom, the liberty, and the independence, how we get this independence and freedom and liberty are also metered in these documents and help form, the republic or the nation or whatever. Okay, so hold that right here, right around the top of your head. When the bylaws are not followed, then what? When the mission statement no longer has a mission, then what? Because immediately, I think, when the mission statement is no longer serving its purpose, meaning the mission part is gone, it's a statement. If I make a statement and I go in a room and I make a statement, it's hotter today, and I come out the room, but if my mission is to communicate to everyone in the house that it's hot today, I'm going to go where the people are. I'm going to check the thermostat. I'm going to be my behaviors. Remember, we talked about behaviors. My behaviors are going to exemplify and demonstrate the mission statement. The bylaws are the mechanism that makes sure that there's some kind of, if I'm going to go from the kitchen to the bathroom to the lanai to the, that's a waste of energy, right? So sometimes our rules, our regulations, our ordinances not only help to make sure that we get everything done, not only there to make sure that we have some sort of system to make sure that it's safe, or to provide safety, to make sure that there's order, but also that, how can we maximize our time? How can we maximize our resources? How can we best use them, right? So if the kitchen is closest to the dining room, I'm not going to go to talk to everybody in the house to say, hey, it's hot, and are you warm? Let's figure out this temperature. I'm going to go from the kitchen to the bathroom to the bedroom to the living room. That'll make no sense. Wherever I start, let's make sure that it's a smooth and fluid process. Unless doing so would create a different situation. So maybe there's a reason why it would go from the kitchen to the bathroom, but that would be spelled out in the bylaws. That's what I'm talking about. We have these things in place that help make sure that we have things covered, that there's a system, that there's order, for a couple of reasons. One, because we need a system and we need order. Life happens. I may have to stop doing something to address an emergency, but if there's a system and there's order in place, when I come back, okay, that's been done, I can pick up and keep going, right? The other reason is I may not be here today. I may have to go someplace else, or someone else may be filling this position. I may move into a different position, so that the aim and the values are maintained and sustained because we have the system or the structure in place supporting that. But what happens when the mission statement loses its mission and the bylaws are not followed? When I have been a social worker over, this is 28 years, something like that, right? And I've worked in several states. And in 1, 2, 3, 4, I've worked in 4 different states. In 3 of those 4 states, I've had interns that I've supervised. And I've said this to all of them, because as far as social work goes, the National Association for Social Workers is our governing body. So by that, I mean, if I enter into a situation where I'm functioning and operating as a social worker, the top, now we're talking about priorities, the top entity that I need to maintain fidelity to whom I need to maintain fidelity is the National Association of Social Workers. That comes above my boss, that comes above the company, that comes above the president of the company, that comes above the board of directors for the company, NASW first. And I would tell them this because, by the time you're beginning your internship, you're fusing together what you learned in class and the things that your projects and those kinds of things with the practical piece. That's why a lot of times it's called practicum, right? But that's where these two come together, and you're figuring out where the book piece goes with the real time piece, and it kind of, that's how that comes to pass. But the thing is, a lot of times when I'm coming to my practicum or I'm going to my internship, my placement, where I'm going to complete my internship hours, what ends up happening is we see this as work. Even if we're not getting paid, we see this as work. And rightly so, because that's what you're getting groomed toward. But the internship is two things happening: mastering and honing in on your skill, right? So with this practice and this knowledge, and as you're putting the information that you learned in school with how now you're finding your brand, almost like your niche or whatever the case may be. But you're also being introduced to the workforce as it relates to your profession. And when the two meet, can be kind of sticky. It doesn't have to be, but it can be. And so knowing that, this is what I always told the interns that I supervised. The NASW can take away your entire career. The company where you work can take your job away, can take your position away, but the NASW can take away your career. And this is why understanding bylaws, understanding policy and procedure, understanding your job description, and understanding mission statements is so critical, especially when you are working in a healthcare setting, but just in general. So let's get back specifically to the topic. On Tuesday, we talked about when safe places aren't safe, and we talked about microaggressions in church, and we were looking at the structural systems that form the foundations of organizations and how these things get stuck, right? We're talking about microaggressions in church and how that comes to pass. But when we're looking at today, language, right? Looking at language and behavior, reprisals, right? Exclusion, inference, discrimination. Do you feel like it's a reasonable expectation to be safe at work, emotionally, physically, spiritually, and mentally? Is that, because it may not be, you may be thinking, I work this place, or this is what I do, or this is my profession. And that really isn't a realistic, and then you have to break that down, because I've worked in different for and within different organizations. And some of the things I did was hard to do. Sitting next to someone who'd just been assaulted, that's not the easiest thing to do, right? So I want to be clear. I'm not speaking specifically of the nature of the tasks that you complete. I mean, when you go to this organization, is it a realistic expectation that you feel safe emotionally, physically, spiritually, and mentally? Let's start there. And do the documents that support that and that form the foundation for this organization or this group or wherever it is that you're going, do they support this? Because I'm going to be very clear. Many organizations, many companies, and many businesses are required to have some sort of a statement that speaks against discrimination, some sort of a statement that speaks against harassment, and then breaks down what harassment, the different types of harassment, and how it's qualified and what to do. Many organizations and businesses and companies are required to have a statement against sexism, ageism, racism, because those are the isms that fall under discrimination. But what they don't share is the microaggressions, because it's so subtle sometimes. the language that we use um, in the hallways and in our conversations, and unfortunately, sometimes in our meetings, may not necessarily be the verbiage of the mission statements and the bylaws. So, in the distance between what's practiced, that's why I said practicum earlier, in the distance between what's practiced and what's established, what are we doing? Where are the scribes? Where are the parliamentarians? Where are the sergeant at arms that hold that space accountable? What are the instruments? What are the things that are systemic and or systematic? So we built it into the system, so it's systemic, but we also and or have created a system so that this thing is in place in case of. What do we do? Because when you talk to people about work, even before the pandemic, when you talk to people about work and you ask them, because I asked some people, you ask them what stresses you out the most about work? You know, if there is anything, if you work for a place and you have no major issues or whatever, but if you did, what makes it difficult? If you have a day that's difficult, you have something about your job, what is it? I'm going to tell you what I was told. The way people talk to someone said the way people talk to me, meaning their coworkers and their supervisors, the way they talk to me like I'm stupid or I'm nobody or I don't matter. Time that I'm supposed to work from this time to this time, but I end up coming in earlier or staying later just so I can finish the things I need to finish. Money, compensation. I don't feel like I'm getting paid for what I'm worth or getting paid for what I do. Or me and so do the same thing, but they get paid more and I don't understand why. And we have the same credentials. So bottom line, if I were to summarize the information that I received when I asked people about, if you're stressed out at work, what is it? And if you have like 10 things that stress you out the most at work, what are the top three? It all centered around how they were treated, their value. And I would tell people that you I'll use myself as an example. When I look at the area that I'm given to work, when I look at the access that I'm permitted in order to perform my duties, when I look at the inclusion or exclusion of my expertise as it relates to the tasks that I'm supposed to perform in my job description, that tells me everything that I need to know. Now, there are other things that contribute, but those three tell me a lot. If you say you have this position and it's important because it's integral to blah, 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 blah. Remember, my position traditionally had something to do with social work. And so that's the well-being of people in general, because I worked in different types of social work. So I'm just saying that generally, right? So the people that came to see me, I was helping them toward some sort of mental health, substance abuse, trauma-related well-being. So we're trying to get you to this place where, get back to some form of stability within those three categories that I just mentioned. Okay. But if people are coming to see me so that we can work through some painful issues or some situations or things that were hard to discuss, and my office is this big and it's by the bathroom, where every time the bathroom flush, here's my point. Next time you go to work, see whose office is where. And I'm not saying this to start anything. I'm talking about so that you understand where the value is, where the priorities are. Because it may be that the office that's the biggest is the one that's also the conference room. So just look. Try not to make any prejudicial assessments. Just look and see, right? Access. If I'm asked to complete a task, but I don't have access to the things I need to do that, do you see that space between the bylaws, the mission statements, and the job descriptions, and blah, 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 and what's actually happening. If you ever watched the movie A Few Good Men, this is a good example. If you haven't, I'm not telling too much business, but in the movie, when they went to trial, Tom Cruise is defending a Marine that had gotten in trouble because they did a code red, and that was like what we would call now hazing, but it was used as I don't want to say disciplinary, but kind of like get your stuff together. And then Kevin Bacon was representing the military. They had, what was his name? Nicholson. Jack Nicholson was on the stand, and he was the person that if to whom all these was it Marines, so they privates, they all answered to him. So the idea was, if he says it, they do it. If he didn't say it, they don't do it. So here's the distance. Him speaking, or making an order, bylaws. Their behavior, they're going to follow that order. They're going to follow what he says over here. Here's the practical part. Here's following the order. Here's the order. The space in between is the part that's not tangible. So if he says a code red, okay, what's a code red? So Kevin Bacon brings out the book that has all the abbreviations and all the information, everything they needed to learn. He was like, well, there's no code red in here. How can he order something if there's no code red? How could that even be? I don't know, but I know that's what happened. So there's that reasonable doubt. Tom Cruise takes the book right out of Kevin Bacon's hand and says, here, where do you eat? Where's the mess hall? And he was like, show me the page where it says where the mess hall is. And he said, well, it's not in here. He's like, are you trying to tell me that you don't eat? That's my point. My point is the distance in between those winks, those microaggressions, those dog whistles that take place, right, in that space. The best way to counter that is to cultivate a healthy work environment. When we have leaders that lead and are not just managers and bosses, that look and see, that are able to either read the temperature in the organization or in their department, or have things in place where they're able to monitor it, right? I may manage something. I may be going from one location to the next location. So I'm not going to be always abreast of the climate of my employees, right? But if I build in different things so I can, catch up and see, are y'all okay today? Y'all seem kind of down. If we have a leader in these positions of manager and boss and whatever, then they're going to be able to understand and recognize morale. And they're going to understand the relationship between feeling valued, being seen, and task completion. Most of the time, when people feel like they matter, when people are dealt with kindly, right, with dignity, respect, and compassion, they generally don't have too much of a hard time doing what's required of them. And even so, there may even be a buy-in, right? If you were raised like I was to take pride in what you do, taking pride in what you do is independent of everything else. Now, it can be further promoted or hindered, if I allow it to be, based upon how I'm treated at work, based upon how I'm talked to, based upon. But I'm able to gauge, the value of what I do, and I don't take it personal, the value of what I do based upon, well, everybody's office got vacuum but mine. I have to provide services that require more than one person in my space, but you gave me the smallest space. And I don't have access to the conference room. That's the stuff that happens in that space. When all doesn't rightly reflect all. So if you look at your bylaws and it says all employees will blah, 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 but you can count on your hand, you can see with your eyes that's not happening, even though it says on paper. How are we maintaining that? How are we, what are the checks and balances that help us govern if these things are taking place? And what is your recourse? Are you able to say, hey, I know that we were planning on X, Y, and Z, or it says this, or the expectation is this, but it hasn't happened. Is there something, that we need to do to make that happen? A leader will put something in place. A leader will take the responsibility and the onus to make sure that they look at that. Maybe I've misunderstood. Maybe it is there. Maybe I don't have access because I didn't go and ask for the key. But if I don't know, I don't know, right? So the leader will look at let's see, where did the breakdown happen? Okay, now, not only we're going to fix it, making sure that you have the access or making sure that you have the space or whatever the case may be, we're going to handle that specifically, but we're also going to figure out what to put in place so that we don't come across this again. When the treatment, and this is what I found inside my career as a social worker, when the treatment, the expectation of how we handle our consumers, our customers, our clients, our patients, because the phrase, the identity changes, like the verbiage changes depending on what year it was, but also the type of social work that I provided. But when the treatment that's expected, what we're told to say, how we're told to interact, blah, 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 aside from my training as a social worker, but what the company says, when the company meters out how we're supposed to interact and how we're supposed to speak, whether it's tone, behavior, whatever, is not at all what we experience as employees. That is a problem. That's an example of when a safe place is not safe. If the dignity, compassion, and respect that is required and expected of me to provide and demonstrate with the people that I serve, I don't receive at my place of work, what is that? Example, and I actually said this, I live in Florida now, but I said this, I think I may have said it in Florida too, but I remember the first time I said it, I was not in Florida. I was living in a different state, working in a different capacity. And I remember it had to do with my time. And they were like, well, you're leaving? I'm like, it's 5. Oh, well, the last family therapist. Okay. I don't know if you realize, but I'm not her. Now, I didn't say that, but I'm looking like, okay, like I'm waiting for you to say something relevant because I got here and began work a little bit early because it takes me, I need to get organized and situated, whatever. And that's my thing, right? But I started on time. I went to lunch. I came back on time. I'm done for the day. I'm leaving. But, right? What's my point? My point is, if you have these structures and it's a start and end time, right? You want me to do more work. I don't get paid overtime, right? There's no, I'm salaried. So I come, I work, I leave. They want to see when I'm here. We have to qualify those hours because just about every place I've ever worked, either all or part of the services I provided were funded by a grant. So there are specific things that grants require. And a lot of times it has to do with timing and to make sure that, what we're saying we're going to do, we're doing, and then how. Well, here's the, right. So here's the information of qualifying documents and behaviors and tasks that substantiate and qualify that we're doing what we said we're going to do. That said, how, and I said that to someone, I said, well, it doesn't seem right. It doesn't even make a lot of sense for me to be teaching people every day how to have healthy boundaries and then come and demonstrate unhealthy boundaries. I'm leaving. It's 5. You don't have any kids. I said, I'm not sure what my uterus has to do with this. That I said out loud, but I didn't say it the first time. This had been something. Well, it's not like you have kids.